There is a fundamental state to our existence, a comfort in the familiar, a quiet pull toward the known path, even when that path leads nowhere new. This is the inertia of the self, a kind of gravitational force that holds us in orbit around who we have been.
You know, the difficulty of change, it's often seen as some kind of failure of will, but it seems to be something else entirely. It feels more like a conflict that's written into the very design of the mind, a resistance that isn't really personal but primal.
There's a deep, ancient part of the mind that values safety above everything else. It sees what's familiar as what's safe, and it doesn't really care if that familiar state serves our higher goals or not. And then there is the conscious desire for growth, for moving into the unknown. These two forces are in a constant, silent opposition. This simple truth really gets to the heart of the mind's essential indifference. It doesn't seem to care about happiness or fulfillment, only patterns. It finds a strange kind of peace in a predictable loop, even a miserable one. It would rather have the safety of a prison it knows than face the perceived danger of an open field.
That feeling of resistance, that internal friction we instinctively try to avoid, well, maybe it isn't a signal to retreat. Maybe it's just evidence that a process has begun. The feeling of old neural pathways being challenged, a sign that the mind's programming is being rewritten. Discomfort, it seems, is the very texture of change itself.
The first impulse is almost always to struggle against the old self, to start a war within. But the first real movement isn't one of conflict. It's one of observation, a kind of detached awareness that simply watches the machine in motion.
To notice the pattern is to finally see the script for what it is. That urge to procrastinate, the impulse to quit, the familiar whisper of an excuse. And in that moment of just noticing, the autopilot gets interrupted. The unconscious cycle is broken, even if it's just for an instant. And in that instant, something shifts. To be an observer of your own habits, that creates distance. It allows you to look at these ingrained behaviors without judgment, almost as if they belong to someone else. It's not an act of condemnation, but one of simple observation, an attempt to understand the mechanism before trying to alter it.
During this phase of awareness, resistance will definitely rise. The mind will test the observer. This is to be expected. This friction just confirms that the old patterns are feeling the pressure of this new awareness. It's a sure sign that the foundation is beginning to shift.
So after the quiet of observation, there is the noise of action. This is the point where the theoretical becomes physical, where the desire for change meets the unyielding reality of actually doing something. And this is where most journeys seem to end.
Motivation, well, it's an emotion. It's a fleeting state that you just can't rely on. It's the spark. Momentum, though, is different. It's a physical principle. It isn't built on feeling, but on consistent, repeated action. It's like a heavy wheel that once it gets turning is very difficult to stop.
It seems the mind doesn't get stronger in a state of ease. It needs a force to push against. Every single act that's performed despite tiredness, or doubt, or fear, it becomes a single repetition that builds new strength. Effort, it turns out, is not the price of change, but the very mechanism of it.
The path of action tends to follow a predictable arc. First, you get the small victories, those little glimpses of a new reality. Then, the old self returns, but with greater force, a final, desperate attempt to reclaim its territory. But for those who persist, the action eventually loses its feeling of effort. It simply becomes natural.
Discipline. It turns out it isn't some feeling of inner strength you have to summon. It's not really an act of willpower. It's just the quiet outcome of consistency. It's the point where doing a new action requires less energy than avoiding it.
And then a profound change happens in the internal landscape. The war subsides. The mind, having been shown a new, consistent path, it stops fighting. It begins to follow. The internal state moves from one of conflict to one of alignment.
Action reshapes behavior for sure, but the deepest layer of the self is the narrative, the story one holds about who they are. All action is ultimately governed by this story. So, to change behavior permanently, the script itself has to be edited, somehow.
To change a habit is really a surface-level adjustment, but to change who you are, that's a fundamental shift in identity. The new actions have to be integrated into the core self-image. One stops doing the new thing and starts being the person who does it.
Every repeated action, every affirmation of a new identity, sends a signal. Over time, these signals do more than just build habits. They literally reconfigure the brain's perception of reality. The story, reinforced by action, becomes the truth.
When the identity has finally shifted, certain qualities just emerge, effortlessly. They aren't pursued directly, they just appear as byproducts of this new self. A focus that isn't forced, an energy that isn't manufactured, a momentum that feels completely inherent.
This is the final reversal. The mind's core programming has been inverted. What it once registered as a threat, discomfort, challenge, effort, it now registers as the path forward. It begins to seek the very resistance it needs for growth, because growth has become the new definition of safety.
The inertia of the self is a constant force. It always pulls toward the past. The only question that really remains is a quiet one. Will the future be merely a repetition, or will it be something else?